this round can go ahead and begin. Were we able to work out the ballot issues we were having?
I think so, yes, sir, at least on my end.
All right, great. So this round can go ahead and begin.
All right, I'm going to ask everyone to hide all non-video participants just to keep the screen clear. So right now, if the advocates would show their video. And once, how many people should I be seeing?
Your Honor, when you say the advocates, do you mean the attorneys?
Yes. So is everyone? Someone just appeared and disappeared.
I believe they were a witness, Your Honor.
Well, we received the message to get started, so let's call the case of the estates of Genesis Petrillo v. Peony Estates and Harper Martini. My name is Judge Adam Herron. We've gotten all the video taken care of. The only people we should see are me and the advocates, and we are ready for the attorney's appearances.
Yes, Your Honor. May the plaintiff proceed with appearances?
May.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Lucas Caldwell, and I'm joined by my co-counsel, Miss Jessica Turner.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And Miss Megan Selane.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And today we represent the estate of Genesis Petrillo.
The defense.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Jazz Wolf, and today, along with my co-counsel, Caitlin Crane.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And Claire Grace.
Good morning, Your Honor.
We'll be representing Peony Estates.
We're going to hear opening statements from each party. I'm going to ask everyone to turn their views to the speaker view so that visible on your screen is the attorney that will be presenting.
Your Honor, may we please do some pretrial matters before we get to opening statements?
Yes, please. And
may I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Now, before we begin, we would like to constructively tender documents to the bench, which include the complaint, the answer, the available case law, other statutory law, stipulations, special instructions, and a pretrial order from Judge Frank Galuza. Now, Your Honor, I'd like to draw your attention to the stipulations, specifically stipulation 3, which states that exhibits 1 through 10 in today's case are pre-admitted and may be used in opening and closing statements.
Okay.
Now, I'd also like to draw your attention to the pretrial order from Judge Frank Galuza. This order states that Peony Estates did not violate Section 12100 of the Building Code and is barred from discussing any topic related to Peony Estates storage and use of pesticides. And along with that, we would also ask to invoke Rule 615, the constructive sequestration of witnesses barring party representatives. And the plaintiff does not have a party representative in today's case. And the defense party representative is the defendant, Harper Martini.
Okay.
And one more thing, Your Honor, we'd also like to invoke or ask to invoke Rule 603, which is just the constructive pre-swearing in of witnesses to save time.
And both of those I will do. Anything from the defense? Well, first, is that all?
Yes, Your Honor. Just one more thing. May we show exhibits on the screen before they admitted, just for identification purposes?
Yes, you may.
And with that, plaintiff is ready to move to opening statements, Your Honor.
Defense?
Yes, Your Honor. We do have just a few more pre-trial matters we'd like to address. First, may we assume that all objection arguments are heard constructively outside the earshot of the jury?
You may.
Also, as for objections, may we assume that any statements objected to and sustained are already stricken, or would you like to ask to strike?
I would like you to ask to strike.
Yes, Your Honor. We would also like to call to your attention that both parties have already agreed that exhibits 1 through 10 are pre-admitted and may be referenced at any point during today's trial.
Okay.
At this time, Your Honor, the defense has no further housekeeping matters and we're ready to proceed.
All right. Let's move to opening statements. The plaintiffs, everyone make sure you're in speaker view. In the upper right box where it says view, click speaker, and the plaintiffs will begin.
Yes, Your Honor, just one moment to prepare the courtroom.
Yes.
May I proceed? May I proceed, Your Honor?
Sorry, you may.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. A desperate plan gone too far. Now, we are here today because a tragedy occurred on June 8th, 2019. This was the day that Genesis Petrillo died. This was also the day that he was supposed to get to marry the love of his life, Casey Soto. But the evidence will show that this didn't happen because Casey's own mother, Harper Martini, gifted Genesis with a bottle of wine laced with pesticides. Members of the jury, this death is a tragedy that could have been avoided. But the evidence will show that the defendant, Harper Martini, purposefully put pesticides in Genesis's wine bottle with the intent to harm him because his desperate plan went too far. Because of this, the estate of Genesis Petrillo is suing Harper Martini for civil battery. Let me take you back to the beginning. The defendant in today's case, Harper Martini, is the owner of Peony Estates Winery, where the wedding rehearsal took place. The evidence will show that the two things the defendant loved the most were her winery and her daughter, Casey. In fact, the defendant wanted Casey to take over the winery one day. But the defendant's perfect plan changed when Casey and Genesis got engaged in July of 2018. The defendant never liked Genesis. And as Genesis and Casey's wedding loomed near, tensions between the defendant and Genesis reached their breaking point because of this voicemail Genesis left the defendant just weeks before the wedding. I'm going to Paris after the wedding, and Casey is coming with me. You'll never see any of us. Find someone else to run your sad little winery. The defendant tried to persuade Genesis and Casey not to go through with the wedding, but it didn't work. So this was when the defendant came up with a new plan to poison Genesis Petrillo, to get the upper hand for once, and to just maybe stop the wedding right in its tracks, to buy herself more time with Casey. But the evidence will show that the defendant took this plan one step too far. The poison the defendant used in the wine bottle was strong, so strong that it didn't just make Genesis sick as the defendant had intended. It killed him. How do we know the defendant had a desperate plan to stop the wedding? Because multiple witnesses will testify to hearing Harper Martini constantly and continually make comments about getting rid of Genesis. Among these witnesses is Sam Arnold, the caterer for Genesis and Casey's wedding. She not only testified to hearing these comments, but to seeing a can of pesticide on the kitchen table near a bottle of special Cara wine meant just for Genesis. Angel Rodriguez, Genesis and Casey's best friend, heard these comments too. She will not only testify to what she heard, but to what she saw. Genesis drinking from that same bottle of Cara wine at the wedding rehearsal. She will explain the events of the wedding rehearsal night leading up to taking Genesis to the hospital. It was at the hospital when the gravity of this desperate plan became real and Genesis died. You'll be hearing from one of Genesis's doctors, Dr. Jimin Kwan. Dr. Kwan will explain Genesis's condition, its progression, and what ultimately led to Genesis's death. Organophosphate pesticide poisoning. Now, members of the jury, as the plaintiff in this case, we hold the burden of proof. That means that we must prove to you by a preponderance of the evidence, meaning more likely than not, that the defendant, Harper Martini, purposefully put pesticides in Genesis's wine bottle with the intent to cause harmful or offensive contact to Genesis, that this action was the direct and proximate cause of the harm that Genesis Petrillo suffered. Now, I want to be clear that an intent to harm does not necessarily mean an intent to kill. Perhaps the defendant didn't mean to kill Genesis by putting this poison in the wine bottle, but she certainly meant to harm him. And as a result, a young man is dead. At the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Luke Caldwell, will stand before you and tell you exactly how the defendant's desperate plan went too far. And he will ask you to find the only verdict the evidence demands. He will ask you to find Harper Martini liable for civil battery. Thank you.
Defense,
Yes,
are you
Your Honor.
ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
May it please the court. Beware the dangers of a single story. Every event is multifaceted. Every person has a unique tale to tell. And every tragedy has a real story, along with the thousands of excuses people come up with to explain it, to bring themselves comfort. Today, the plaintiff is bringing you a single story. And that single story, well, it's a desperate plan. It's a desperate story. And it's going too far. The plaintiff desires, they need to find closure since Genesis' passing, and we want nothing more than to give them that closure. But it won't be found in attacking an innocent woman while she could be comforting her only child. And that's the danger of a single story. It takes away the love and kindness that we all need after a tragedy like this. We don't know what happened that night at the rehearsal dinner. The plaintiff claims that Harper Martini attempted to poison Genesis so he would fall ill. But all we know is that Genesis became sick at the end of a long, long evening of drinking and partying, and went to the hospital and did not survive. That is all we know. But today, we will be bringing 6 witnesses to you with 6 different stories, all unique in their own way. First, the plaintiff will bring forward their case, and they will bring forward Angel Rodriguez. Angel will stand there and tell you that they knew everything about what was going on between Harper, Genesis, and Casey, when in reality, they didn't have the full story. They never really got to talk to them about what was going on, and Genesis didn't share with them what the real problem was. Next, they'll bring forward Dr. Kwan, Dr. Jimin Kwan. And Dr. Kwan was the physician for Genesis when he was taken to the hospital. But Dr. Kwan did not look into every possible story behind how Genesis fell ill. He did not examine Genesis properly and could not come to a complete conclusion of what really happened that night, of what the one story was. Next, finally, they'll call Sam Arnold. And Sam Arnold will testify how they only knew of the tension between Harper and Genesis through Harper. They only had the adjacent to one side of a story. They never had the full story. Today, the plaintiff does hold the burden of proof, and in a battery case, the burden of proof consists of the preponderance of evidence. They must convince you that the story they are telling us is more than 50% likely to be true. But when we are bringing 6 different stories before you, how is it possible that any one of them is more than 50% likely? So at the end of today's case, you will have heard 6 different stories with 6 vastly different people. They're all going to present unique tales that don't completely align with each other. And that's because there is no single story in this case. But the plaintiff is going to assert again and again that there is a single story, despite 6 different testimonies, 3 of which they have brought themselves. They will ignore those stories in favor of pursuing the one that best fits their goal. And their goal is receiving $4 million in damages from a family-owned winery. Where is the justice in concocting a story out of dozens? There is none. It is simply a desperate plan gone too far. Beware the danger of a single story narrative. It won't just cost a grieving woman millions of dollars. It will cost our justice system its integrity, its reliability, its own story. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to call our first witness, the plaintiff's first witness next. But before we do that, everyone click gallery view in your upper right. And that way you'll see the attorney and the witness. And plaintiff, is your witness here? Okay. You may
Yes,
call
Your
your
Honor.
witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, plaintiff calls Angel Rodriguez to the stand. May I proceed?
You may.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hello, everyone. I am Miss Angel Rodriguez.
And what do you do for a living, Miss Rodriguez?
I'm a kindergarten teacher at Rapid River Valley Elementary School.
And why are you here today?
I'm here because I want to bring justice to Genesis and his family by shedding light on what Harper Martini did to my best friend.
Well, let's take a step back. Who's Genesis?
Genesis is my best friend, who I met back in 2016, along with his future fiance, Casey Soto.
And how is your relationship with Genesis Petrillo and Casey Soto?
I mean, we clicked instantly. Well, we clicked instantly after I had a few dirty Shirley Temples. Felt like I had known them for forever. A few years later, our friend group heard that Casey and Genesis were getting married, and we couldn't have been any happier.
And did you take a role in the planning?
Absolutely. So our entire friend group actually went out and got together to plan everything. And it was just so exciting. You know, we picked the colors, the themes, the menu. We even chose the venue. We decided the wedding was going to be held at Rosie and Pedro. It was just so perfect until Harper came into the picture.
Who is Harper?
Harper's Casey's mom, and she started taking over the wedding planning right away. It was so frustrating to watch.
And how is the planning going now that the defendant was involved?
I mean, she was just really taking over the entire thing. The one thing that she did that just made us all really upset was that she changed the venue from Rosie and Pedro to Peony Estates Winery. Everyone was just so upset and so tense, we decided to have a little shindig at the Black Bear Hotel.
And when was this party at the Black Bear Hotel?
I believe the party was on May 11th, 2019.
And were the issues between Genesis Petrillo and the defendant ever brought up at this party?
Unfortunately, they were. I remember seeing Casey and Genesis arguing about how Harper was handling the wedding planning. It was just so chaotic. I felt like I was back in my classroom with my 17 little kids. And then Casey stormed away, and Genesis told me he had to make a phone call, and he rushed outside.
Objection, more prejudicial than probative.
Response.
Your Honor, for something to be more prejudicial and probative, the prejudicial value has to substantially outweigh the probative value in today's case. And understanding the relationship between Casey Soto and Genesis Petrillo and the planning that went up to the wedding where Mr. Petrillo died the next morning, I believe is highly probative in today's case.
Overruled.
Now, did you go outside with Mr. Petrillo when he made this phone call?
No, I didn't want to get too caught up with them arguing, but I learned that he actually did call Harper, but she never answered the phone. So he ended up leaving her a voicemail.
And have you read a transcript of this voicemail before you arrived in court today?
Yes, sir, I have.
And would you recognize a transcript of this voicemail if I were to show it to you today?
Yes, sir, I would.
At this time, Exhibit 8, which has already been pre-admitted into evidence, should be showing on screen. Now, Ms. Rodriguez, what does this voicemail say?
Well, Genesis tells Harper that, him and Casey are moving to Paris and that he would never, ever have to see them or their future kids again. And he talks about how poorly Harper treated them and that she didn't deserve them.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to talk to you about the rehearsal dinner. When was the rehearsal dinner?
That was actually June 7th of 2019.
And how was the beginning of the night?
Awful. Harper and Genesis just kept fussing at one another, just bickering. And at one point, Harper said, Genesis should just leave and save the family the headache. Otherwise, I'll make you disappear.
What happened after the defendant
Objection.
said that?
Misleading the jury.
Can you explain more?
Yes, Your Honor. Opposing counsel is misleading the jury with the witness's statement, specifically with Harper Martini's statement along the lines of, I'll make you disappear. They are taking Harper Martini's statements out of context and thus not allowing the jury proper knowledge of exactly why those statements were made.
And what's your response to that?
Your Honor, I think this is something that Ms. Rodriguez heard at the wedding party. And to say that this statement was out of context is that the whole context is in the statement, is that the defendant wanted Ms. Petrillo to disappear. I don't believe any more context needs to be added. And I believe that Ms. Rodriguez should be able to testify to something that she heard the defendant say at the wedding rehearsal.
The defense, you can put it in context on cross overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Would you like me to ask that question again?
No, sir. It was just, like I said, just chaotic. They just kept arguing and fighting. And, once he said he should leave and just save the family the headache, otherwise he'd make her disappear. It was a lot,
What happened after the defendant said he wanted Mr. Petrillo to disappear?
She became a monster. She violently grabbed Genesis' arm and yanked him out into the hallway to keep bickering. My 5-year-old students know how to keep their hands to themselves better than Harper does.
And did you see the defendant again that night?
Yeah, I was walking down the hall just an hour before dinner, and I just saw Harper walking toward the kitchen with a can of pesticide. I thought it was just a little wacky, so of course I asked Harper what the can was for, and that's when she said, it's for Genesis. What Harper said really scared me.
How was Genesis once the rehearsal dinner actually started?
Well, first I realized that he was drinking a lot less than someone who was about to get married. And when I looked beside him during Harper's speech, he was shaking. It was just so horrible.
And did Mr. Petrillo ever start drinking more throughout the night?
I mean, slowly he did. After we all got these gifts of wine from Harper, I got a bottle of Horizon, as did most of the wedding party, except for Genesis, who got a bottle of Cara. Once he received the bottle, he began drinking more.
And would you recognize this bottle of Cara if I were to show it to you today?
Yes, I would, sir.
At this time, plaintiff should be screen sharing Exhibit 2A, which has already been pre-admitted into evidence under Stipulation 3. Now, Ms. Rodriguez, is this the bottle of Cara that you saw the defendant hand Mr. Petrillo?
Yes, sir, it is.
And has it been changed or altered in any way since the last time you saw it?
No, sir.
Now, did you see anyone but Mr. Petrillo drink from this bottle of Cara?
Well, I did actually have one small sip. I was just looking to try something new, you know? And when I sipped it, I spit it out almost immediately. It was disgusting. It tasted like something they serve in a cafeteria. It was awful. Besides me having that awful spit that I spit out immediately, I saw no one else drink the Cara.
And did you see how much of this bottle of Cara wine that Mr. Petrillo drank?
Um, I would say he drank most of the bottle. He had several glasses of wine before he started to get up and dance. And that's when I knew something was terribly wrong.
Why did you think something was wrong?
Well, his speech became slurred and his coordination, it was just off completely. And thinking back to all the times we'd gotten together before in the past, I had never seen him act like this. I had seen him drink beers and shots and multiple drinks in an evening, and he had never acted like this. So for him to have a couple of glasses of wine and act like this, I knew something was awfully, awfully wrong.
Did Mr. Petrillo get better as the night went on?
Unfortunately, he didn't. A bit after midnight, he started sweating a lot and throwing up. And I just kept asking him, what can I do to help you? And he sat up and he said, 911. And then he passed out on the floor. I called 911 immediately.
And did you go to the hospital with Mr. Petrillo that night?
Yeah, I actually rode with him to the hospital. You know, he's my best friend. Well, he was my best friend. I just waited with him all night, all morning, you know, till the next day. And then the doctors told me that he had actually slipped into a coma due to some kind of poisoning.
What did you do after the doctors told you that Mr. Petrillo had been poisoned?
Well, after I heard that his condition was getting worse, I decided I should go back to Peony Estates and tell Casey. So I hopped in an Uber, rushing off to Peony Estates. And when I was walking in, the first person I ran into was actually Harper. And before I even got a word out, Harper said, Princess got poisoned? Oh no, we'll have to cancel the wedding. Go tell Casey. I hadn't said anything about Justice being sick, much less about him being poisoned. I don't know how Harper knew any of that.
Thank you. I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor. And I tender this witness for cross-examination.
Ms. Wolf, you may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Rodriguez, you first met Casey and Genesis in 2016, 4 years ago, right?
Yes, ma'am, I did. It was the greatest.
Yes. And you were introduced by Drew Mitsuka?
Yes, I was.
Mitsuka had been friends with them for a while.
Yeah, quite a long time.
And after you met Casey and Genesis, you guys were thick as thieves.
Yeah, all besties.
Unfortunately, after Genesis passed away, your relationship with Casey's been strained.
Yeah, it's been very difficult lately.
All right. Well, now I'd like to talk about the time between the engagement and the rehearsal dinner. You were there when the wedding planning began, right?
Yes, I was. I was a part of the entire planning.
And then Harper started helping?
Helping, I guess, you know, more so taking over. You know, it was awful.
When Harper became involved, some of the plans changed. Isn't that right?
All of the plans changed. I mean, I just can't get over the fact that he changed the venue from Rosie and Pedro to Peony Estates Winery. It's very upsetting.
I understand, Ms. Rodriguez, but if you could keep your answers to yes or no, I would very much appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
When Harper started helping with the wedding and some of the plans changed, Harper hired an event planner. Isn't that right?
I believe so, yes, ma'am.
And during the planning, you felt like there was tension between the couple and Harper?
Yeah, they just kept arguing a lot. It was very chaotic.
The argument seemed really complicated?
I would say so, yes, ma'am.
And you didn't always know who was arguing about what?
No, there was just always an argument or some sort of confusion or anger. It was just a lot to deal with. I never really knew. No, ma'am.
Right. So you went to Drew Matsukas, and Matsukas, another member of the wedding party, told you not to get involved in the arguments.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay the statements of Drew Matsukas.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
This is an exception to hearsay, as I am not asking the witness to testify as to the content of Drew Matsuka's statements, rather the effect it had on the listener.
And what was the question?
Drew Matsuka, another member of the wedding party, told you not to get involved in the arguments.
Overruled.
So Drew told you not to get involved in the arguments, right?
Yes, he did.
And because of that, you never really knew the specifics of any of the arguments?
Not necessarily, but I do remember there was just a lot of arguing, yelling, chaos.
But you never knew the specifics, right?
Unfortunately, no, not always.
All right, now let's talk about the party at the Black Bear Hotel.
Okay.
Casey and Genesis had what you thought was a tense discussion, right?
Yeah, it was very tense. I could just tell. Awful.
Mm-hmm. And you tried to find out what was going on, but Genesis didn't tell you?
No, but I could just tell, it has something to do with Harper and the wedding planning.
But
I
Genesis
knew.
didn't tell you that.
He didn't tell me that, no ma'am.
Okay, and after the party, you didn't notice any tension between the couple and Harper until the rehearsal dinner, right?
Not necessarily, no ma'am.
Okay, let's move on to the rehearsal dinner itself. And if it becomes upsetting for you, please let me know and we'll take a minute, okay?
Thank you.
Harper toasted Genesis at the party?
Yeah, he did. Very nice speech, which was kind of out of the ordinary for Harper.
Mm-hmm. But Harper still gave Genesis a nice bottle of wine.
Yeah, he got a bottle of Cara while the rest of us received a bottle of Horizon.
And to you, Genesis seemed relieved?
He was quite anxious.
Objection, Your Honor. The question calls for speculation of the mindset of Genesis Petrillo.
Your Honor, may I be heard? As to speculation, I am not asking the witness to speculate. I'm asking what the witness thought Genesis looked like, not how Genesis was actually feeling.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yeah.
Well, if opposing counsel is asking Ms. Rodriguez what she saw, having to go into Genesis's mindset of whether he was relieved or not, Ms. Rodriguez, they can ask Ms. Rodriguez if she seemed relaxed of any way, but getting into the mindset of relieved seems to be reaching too far to me.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
You may.
Relieved and relaxed are two synonyms, and I did use the word seemed in my question, so I am not the question does not call for speculation.
Overruled. I think she can testify rationally based on her perception.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Once again, Ms. Rodriguez, to you, Genesis seemed relieved, right?
I mean, I guess just a bit, because I do recall during his speech, he was just shaking a lot and was quite anxious.
Right, but after the toast, he seemed relieved, yes?
I guess you could say he seemed a bit more calm.
Okay, and you also saw Genesis have several glasses of wine, isn't that right? Ms. Rodriguez, did you hear me?
Yes, I did. Yes, that was true. He did have several glasses of wine.
All right, but you weren't watching Genesis the entire night.
No, I was out and about, talking to the other people in the wedding.
So you're not exactly sure what Genesis drank?
And a few shots we had later on.
Mm-hmm. But you can't be sure that Genesis didn't have anything else? I'm sorry, Ms. Rodriguez, you're cutting out a bit. Is that happening for anyone else?
Yes.
Yes.
Ask the question again.
Yes, Your Honor.
I'm so sorry. No.
It's all right, Ms. Rodriguez. No, you're not sure what else Genesis drank that night? Okay. And Drew, who's known Genesis.
No.
Yes, of course. And Drew, who's known Genesis longer, did not express any concern for Genesis' state?
No.
Okay. Finally, I do want to talk about what followed that night. And once again, if it becomes too difficult, please let me know. When Genesis fell ill, you went with him to the hospital.
Yes, I rode with him all the way to the hospital, stayed with him all night.
Right. But you did eventually return to tell everyone what had happened.
Of course, Casey needed to be there.
Of course. But you were still a little drunk when you told everyone, right?
I wouldn't say so. Being in the moment of the hospital and the ambulance, it was really kind of sobering. Seeing your best friend sick and almost dying, it changed my perspective and my state of mind.
Is that your testimony today, Ms. Rodriguez?
I mean, that's what I personally feel I was feeling at the moment.
Right. Ms. Rodriguez, are you aware that you signed an affidavit before this trial?
I am.
And were you aware that you were allowed to change and add any pertinent information to this affidavit before the trial began?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Are you aware that you were allowed to change or add any pertinent information to the affidavit before the trial began?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, unfortunately, I do not have the affidavit prepared for screen sharing. However, do you have access to the affidavit, Your Honor, and Ms. Rodriguez?
I do, yes.
I do.
Ms. Rodriguez, if you could please turn to page 5 of the case and to line 144 and read along silently while I read aloud. I was hungover, maybe still a little drunk, when I ran into Harper in the hallway leading to Casey's room. Did I read that correctly, Ms. Rodriguez?
Yes, ma'am, you did.
Okay, Ms. Rodriguez, moving on. So you were still a little drunk when you told everyone what had happened, right?
Sure.
Okay, I have one last question for you.
Okay.
In regards to the relationship between the couple and Harper, you never got the full story, right?
No, only bits of what I heard through arguments and other people.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. At this time, defense has no further questions.
Is there going to be a redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just ask that this witness be allowed to step down.
You may step down, Ms. Rodriguez, and call your next witness. You're sworn in. You may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff calls Dr. Jimin Kwan to the stand. Now, can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hello, my name is Dr. Jimin Kwan.
What do you do for a living, Dr. Kwan?
I'm the chief emergency physician here at River Valley Hospital in Midlands.
Why are you here today?
Well, I treated Genesis Petrillo on the night of his death. Due to this, I was asked to recount my examination on that night, as well as shed some light on what could have caused his illness.
Well, before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit about your education?
Certainly. I graduated from Georgia Tech with my bachelor's of science in biology with a minor in chemistry. I then went on to get my medical degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
Can you tell us about your past work experience that would qualify you to testify today?
Of course. I completed my residency at Emory's Department of Emergency Medicine. I then went on to take a fellowship in medical toxicology, which is where I got my expertise. In fact, throughout my career, I've published several articles on medical toxicology and emergency medicine.
What articles have you published on medical toxicology and emergency medicine?
Well, there are 5 of them, but one specifically pertinent to this case is entitled An Accident or a Therapeutic Chain of Events, Common Misdiagnoses in Medical Toxicology, and How to Correct Them. And another is entitled A Woman's Weapon or an Unfortunate Accident, an Analysis of U.S. Poisoning Cases.
What data or evidence did you use to prepare your report in today's case?
I used the toxicology and laboratory testing report, the death certificate of Genesis Petrillo, the analytical report of Mr. Petrillo's wine bottle, an alcohol impairment chart, and the affidavit of Angel Rodriguez. Of course, my main data came from my examination of Mr. Petrillo on that night.
And was this information sufficient to draw conclusions in this case?
Yes, ma'am. All of the facts and data were more than sufficient.
What methods did you use to come to these conclusions?
I examined Genesis Petrillo per physician standards, taking her vitals, getting him stable in a condition, and then ordered testing to confirm my hypothesis that I had formed. In addition, I also reviewed any and all necessary exhibits and reports for this case.
And did you reliably apply these methods to your conclusions in today's case?
Yes, ma'am.
I want to start by talking about your initial encounter with Mr. Petrillo. When did you first see him?
I first encountered Mr. Petrillo around 12:42 a.m. on June 8th, 2019, when he came into the emergency room.
And how was he when you first saw him?
When Mr. Petrillo first came in, he was vomiting, had slurred speech, and indicated some stomach cramps and tightness in the chest. Due to how severe these symptoms were, I admitted him for a full examination.
And what did you do in order to complete this full examination?
Well, I approached him as I would an alcohol poisoning case. I took his vitals, examined his cardiovascular system, and took samples of his vomit. However, it was during this examination that I saw some symptoms that were contradictory to alcohol poisoning.
What did you notice that made you believe Mr. Petrillo was experiencing something other than alcohol poisoning?
Well, to start, Mr. Petrillo's pupils were contracted, and generally alcohol dilates the pupils. In addition, he was experiencing symptoms that weren't related to alcohol poisoning, such as muscle twitching, excessive tearing, and incontinence. Lastly, Mr. Petrillo's pulse had slowed, and generally alcohol promotes a weak yet rapid pulse.
Based on these symptoms, what did you decide to do next?
I ordered a poisons and toxins analysis in addition to my toxicology report.
Why did you order a poisons and toxins analysis?
I had started to suspect that Mr. Petrillo had ingested something toxic other than alcohol. Specifically, I believe he had ingested an organophosphate poison. In fact, his symptoms all matched the expected progression in a pesticide poisoning case.
What is organophosphate poison?
It's a type of poison commonly used in insecticides. It's very dangerous to humans as it attacks the nervous system and shuts down the production of an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase, eventually leading to nervous system failure. Now, due to this, I had to work fast as even in small doses it's lethal, and Mr. Petrillo was experiencing very severe symptoms of this poisoning.
How can a person be exposed to poison by organophosphate?
There are 3 ways to be exposed, but Mr. Petrillo's symptoms most closely matched an oral ingestion of the poison.
Once you discovered that Mr. Petrillo had likely ingested the poison, how did you proceed?
I began administering an antidote right away. Mr. Petrillo's symptoms were extremely advanced and his condition was rapidly declining, so I had to start as soon as I could.
And was the antidote successful?
Unfortunately, no. A few minutes after I administered the antidote, Mr. Petrillo had a coughing fit and a seizure. He fell into a coma that he never woke up from and died at 9:27 a.m. on June 8th, 2019.
Now I want to talk to you about the testing you did on Mr. Petrillo. When did you receive those results?
I received both the initial results and the tox report shortly after his death.
And would you recognize a copy of the unknown poisons and toxins analysis portion of that report if I were to show it to you today?
Yes, ma'am, I would.
Your Honor, at this time, my co-counsel should be screen sharing Exhibit 6, the poisons and toxins analysis.
There it is.
Dr. Kwan, what have I just placed in front of you?
This is the unknown poisons and toxins portion of the lab report.
Is it a fair and accurate copy?
Yes, ma'am.
Has it been changed or altered in any way?
No, ma'am.
Your Honor, Exhibit 6 is pre-admitted under stipulations. Dr. Kwan?
Oh,
Yes.
continue.
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Kwan, according to this analysis, what did Mr. Petrillo's results show?
The results showed that Mr. Petrillo had low acetylcholinesterase levels, and an organophosphate pesticide was in his blood. Testing of his stomach contents confirmed that he had ingested wine earlier that evening, and testing of the wine confirmed that it had the same organophosphate pesticide in it.
Dr. Kwan, what are your overall conclusions regarding Genesis Petrillo's cause of death?
I can say to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty that Mr. Petrillo ingested wine contaminated with an organophosphate pesticide in the evening of June 7th, 2019, and that this pesticide is what ultimately caused his death.
Thank you, Dr. Kwan. I have no further questions at this time, and I tender this witness for cross-examination.
Defense may proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Dr. Kwan. Now, you are on the board of directors for Doctors for Organic Solutions, isn't that correct?
Yes, in my free time away from the emergency room.
And Doctors for Organic Solutions is an organization that advocates against the use of chemical pesticides.
Correct, we are an activist group.
Thank you. And you would agree that simply using chemical pesticides presents an immense and needless danger to humans.
Yes, when they are misused, they can cause a danger to humans, correct?
You called the use of chemical pesticides a scourge to the environment.
Yes.
Now, isn't it true that you are hopeful that your involvement in today's case will help convince legislators to curtail or outright ban the use of chemical pesticides?
My involvement? No. My conclusions and my testimony in today's case is unbiased and away from my personal life and the board of directors. It's simply the fact that someone had to die for the dangers of this pesticide to be made aware.
So you do not agree that you are hopeful that your involvement in today's case will help convince legislators to curtail or outright ban the use of chemical pesticides?
To be very clear, it's not my involvement, it's the fact that Genesis Petrillo died. My testimony is unbiased and unrelated to my personal life.
But didn't you state in your sworn affidavit that you hope that your involvement in today's case specifically will help convince legislators to curtail or outright ban the use of chemical pesticides?
I believe in my report I stated that I hope that the evidence of Genesis Petrillo dying from this pesticide would be case in point, not my testimony in today's case.
Would you like me to read from your affidavit?
Sure.
I am hopeful that this case will help convince our legislators to strongly curtail, if not outright ban, the use of chemical pesticides. So is that a yes to my question?
To hearsay under improper impeachment?
Response?
Your Honor, I think it's very important that this evidence be made aware. This is something he stated in his affidavit, so.
I'm going to overrule it, but please speak up. I got a message saying that you're difficult to hear. I can hear you, but I don't know if the recording is. So everyone speak up.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Now, I want to talk about Genesis Petrillo. You initially believed that their symptoms were a result of alcohol poisoning.
When they first walked in, yes.
And then you later came to the conclusion that Genesis Petrillo had ingested an organophosphate solution.
Correct.
And there's actually 3 ways to become poisoned. This includes inhalation, skin absorption, and oral ingestion.
Yes, ma'am.
And you chose to proceed on the belief that that Genesis Petrillo was poisoned orally.
Less of a belief and more of a well-founded hypothesis. I saw his symptoms and their progression and moved forward with that knowledge.
But you didn't examine Genesis Petrillo's entire body for signs of skin contact to poison.
He was in critical condition. I worked with the best knowledge I had at the time.
So is that a no to my question?
I didn't have a chance to examine his entire body, no.
Thank you. And you also didn't run any tests to determine if the poisoning originated from inhalation.
There would have been signs of an esophageal burn if that was the case, and there were none of that. So we proceeded without that knowledge, without needing to worry about that test.
Okay, thank you. Now, when an individual becomes poisoned by an organophosphate solution, the production of a specific enzyme is inhibited?
Correct, acetylcholinesterase.
And this causes the nervous system to fail.
Yes.
But a low presence of this enzyme doesn't tell you specifically how much organophosphate solution was consumed.
No, it doesn't say specifically, but it is a marker that it is present.
But you can't tell if it was a little amount or a large amount.
No, ma'am.
Now, isn't it true that any potential ingestion of an organophosphate solution is potentially fatal?
Yes, like I said on direct, it's lethal in even small doses.
Now, isn't it true there have also been several instances where an individual has been hospitalized or killed after consuming the amount remaining on food?
I beg your pardon? Do you mind repeating the
Haven't
question?
there been several? Yeah, I'm sorry. Haven't there been several instances where an individual has become hospitalized or killed after consuming food with a remaining amount of pesticide on it?
Correct. The amount varies from food to food, but generally any amount left on food can be lethal.
Thank you. So I want to talk about another remote possibility. If Genesis Petrillo had become poisoned by consuming contaminated food, it could have dissolved in the stomach and combined with the wine.
It could have, however, from the timeline that I was informed of from Angel, the
But
times are
it is
simply
a remote
too short.
possibility.
Remotely, but not likely.
And if this did happen, this would have made the uncontaminated wine appear contaminated.
Again, a big if. Remotely, still not likely, though.
But if this had happened, it would have made the uncontaminated wine appear contaminated.
Correct. If it had happened, yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions for this witness at this time.
Redirect.
No redirect, Your Honor. I just ask that this witness can constructively step down.
You may step down. And next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff would like to call Ms. Sam Arnold to the stand.
Ms. Arnold, you are sworn in and you may proceed.
Hello, can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hello, I am Sam Arnold.
And what do you do for a living, Ms. Arnold?
I currently serve as Rapid River Valley's most prestigious food service provider. After attending culinary schools in France, I eventually moved here and opened my own food catering business.
And what's your involvement in today's case?
I'm here today to tell everyone what I know about the death of Genesis Petrillo and his relationship with Upper Martini, as well as what I saw at the rehearsal dinner. You see, I was the caterer.
Well, we can get into that in just a second, but first I'd like to know, who is Genesis Petrillo?
Genesis was the soon-to-be spouse of Casey Soto, as a child of Upper Martini. Casey and Genesis were to be married, but unfortunately, Genesis passed away after the rehearsal.
I'd also like
Your
to...
Honor, I apologize, but the attorney on our bench that is supposed to be listening in on this direct currently is experiencing technical difficulties. Could we take a quick pause while she gets that fixed?
Yes, we should take a pause. And
Thank
who is
you.
it supposed to be?
Claire Grace is supposed to be listening in, but she's having some technical difficulties right now, which we are
Okay,
currently-
I just got back in. For some reason, it kicked me out. My apologies.
Ready? Good.
I'm ready to proceed. Thank you.
You didn't, nothing objectionable. I guess you don't know, but let's just continue.
All right, Ms. Arnold, now I'd like to talk about Harper Martini. How do you know her?
I met Apel back in 2016 when our winery, Peony Estates, was celebrating its 1-year anniversary. I was hired to cater the party, and since then, Peony Estates has been one of my largest clients.
Well, I'd like to know about the relationship between the defendants and Genesis Petrillo. Do you know anything about that?
Unfortunately, I do. When I first met with Apel to discuss the plans for the wedding, she made it very clear that she did not like Genesis very much. She would get very verbal when talking about him. And towards the end of our meeting, I even heard her say, anyone but Genesis, literally anyone. But she wasn't looking at me, so I thought it best to leave.
Okay, now I'd like to talk about the rehearsal, the wedding rehearsal day. How did that start?
Started off fine. I made my way to Peony fairly early and encountered Apel in the kitchen when she was working with several bottles of wine. Mostly the 2017 mostly the 2017 Horizon, one of Peony Estate's most popular wines. But I did see a unique bottle, which Apel told me was a 2019 Gara.
Do you know who that bottle of wine was for?
I do. I asked Apel and she informed me that it was for Genesis. She said he was getting something special that she hoped would take care of the problems forever.
What did Harper do with the bottle after saying that?
She just asked if I could pass out the bottles later that evening as gifts to Genesis and the wedding party. She really reiterated that the bottle of Gar had to go to Genesis, while everyone else would receive Horizon.
And how did you respond to that?
I told her I would be happy to help, and then I went to leave the kitchen, but not before I saw a can of pesticide sitting on the counter in the kitchen that I was meant to work in. I did not like that. I asked her why it was there.
And what did Harper say?
She said it was to kill
Objection,
pests like
hearsay.
Genesis.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
Yeah.
Given that this statement does come from the party opponent as an exception to Rule 801D2A, this is admissible in court today.
Miss Grace,
No response, Your Honor.
overruled.
Go ahead, Miss Arnold.
Yeah, Abel told me that it was for pests like Genesis, to kill pests like Genesis.
Nothing further, Your Honor. I tender this witness for cross-examination.
All right, defense,
May I proceed?
you may.
Now, there were tensions leading up to the wedding, correct?
Sorry, I mean, yes,
But you only heard about them from Harper, right?
mostly.
And you never talked to Genesis.
Genesis spoke to me briefly, but never too much, no.
Never about the tensions, right?
No, not really, mostly about France and about Abel's wine.
And you never spoke with Casey about the tensions either, right?
No, I'm just a caterer.
In fact, you were merely an observer to the relationship between the three, correct?
Except for when Abel complained to me.
So you were just an observer, though. You did not have intimate knowledge of the relationship between the three.
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
That's not objection.
Overruled.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
If you would, yes.
You did not have intimate knowledge of the relationship between the three people, just what you heard from Genesis, right? Or from Harper, right?
From Abel, yes.
And you also didn't know anything about Genesis's relationship with others, right?
No.
Now I'd like to discuss the rehearsal dinner. Many people had access to the kitchen that night, right?
Me and my team mostly, but the workers for Peony Estates, I suppose.
Do you have an exact list of every single person who came in and out of there?
I do not. Not many come in when I am working with my own art.
Now I would like to direct the court's attention to Exhibit 2A, which has been pre-admitted. This is, I'll wait for it to be pulled up on the screen. Can we have Exhibit 2A pulled up? I'm just going to go ahead and proceed. Are you familiar with Exhibit 2A, the bottle of Cara wine?
Yes, I am.
So this is the bottle that you presented Genesis with, right?
As instructed by Harper, yes.
But you did not physically see this bottle being poisoned, right?
No.
In fact, you never even saw anyone drink the Cara, correct?
No, I was busy in the kitchen.
And you didn't even specifically see Genesis drink the Cara?
Again, I was in the kitchen.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
And just for clarification, you weren't asking me, were you, to be sharing exhibits?
No, Your Honor. I was asking our timekeeper, but I am sure that we will get this worked out with that. Thank you.
Redirect or excused or?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just asked that my witness be allowed to step down.
All right, you may be excused.
Merci.
I assume that that is it for plaintiff's case in chief. Can the plaintiffs confirm that?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff rests its case in chief and, time permitting, ask for a brief 5-minute recess.
Yeah, we're going to take a 5-minute break now and proceed with defense's case in chief. So I'll see everyone back at 11:25. Just remember that this is being live streamed. I'm going to turn my camera off during that time. So see you soon. Can someone from each side let me know when their whole team's ready?
The plaintiff is ready to go, Your Honor.
Defense?
The defense is also ready to proceed.
All right. Okay, defense, call your first witness.
At this time, Your Honor, the defense calls Austin Lewis to the stand.
All right, you're pretty sworn in. You may proceed.
Good morning. Could you please state your name for the court?
Hello, my name is Austin Lewis.
And what do you do for a living?
I work at Peony Estates, Midland's most fine winery.
How long have you worked at Peony Estates?
I've worked at Peony Estates for the past 5 years, since 2015. Harper asked me to come along with her on her new venture, and I couldn't say no. It just sounded like a great idea to me.
And what does your job entail there?
I'm the head winemaker, so I oversee our creation, bottling, harvesting, fermentation, aging, and bottling at Peony Estates. I'm one of those do-it-all employees.
And why did you choose to work with Harper?
Harper was very experienced. It was a relief to work with someone as knowledgeable about wines as Harper.
And in your years of working with Peony Estates, have you had any issues with Harper?
There was a minor disagreement over pesticide usage, but other than that, we were partners in crime, or should I say, partners in wine.
What was that disagreement about?
Harper wanted to begin spraying pesticide around the bottling area and the building. I wasn't so fond of the idea. I guess you could say it bugged me, but Harper knows what she's doing.
Other than that, how were you and Harper?
We were great.
How long have, oh, I apologize. Continue.
I threw away some grapes that may have been exposed, and I expected Harper to whine about it, but she was really cool about it.
And how long have you known her?
I've known her for about 8 years now.
And in your 8 years of knowing Miss Martini, how would you describe her?
Harper is the most kind person I have ever met.
All right, let's move on to more talk about the pesticides. Where did you store them?
Well, originally we stored them in a storage barn, but that developed a leak and the health inspector told us we should probably move it closer. So we decided to build a new storage shed closer to the estate.
And how protected was that shed?
Since it was newly built, we didn't have the time to properly put security on the shed.
Were there any other security problems?
There was an issue with some wannabe reporter snooping around in our employees only room.
What do you mean snooping around?
I mean trespassing. We clearly had an employees only sign up, but the reporter took the employees only sign as an available to everyone.
What did you do to prevent further break-ins?
We added a padlock. Silly me, thinking a padlock would stop anyone from entering our employees only room. Lonnie Paris, the reporter, once again took it upon themselves to break into our bottling area.
What was behind the employees only door?
Our bottling area and Harper Martini's office.
And who all, to your knowledge, had access to that area?
Employees like Drew Matazukis, as well as health inspectors and also Lonnie Paris.
And where was the bottle of Cara kept?
Behind the employees only door in the bottling area.
How would you describe security at Peony Estates?
We'd have to have it to describe it.
All right, one last question for you, Mr. Lewis. What, in your opinion, was Peony Estates' fatal flaw?
Our lack of security. In theory, anyone could have had access to our pesticide and to our wine. It's an issue.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Lewis. At this time, the defense has no further questions, and we pass the witness for cross.
Plaintiff, yeah, you can begin.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Lewis, you know that the defendant has a child.
Yes, Casey is a wonderful person. She's been around the estates a lot, and Harper did a wonderful job raising her.
And you know that Casey had a fiance.
Yes, Genesis was also wed to Casey.
And you're aware that Harper and Genesis did not get along.
I mean, I'm aware, yes.
Harper actually told you that he hated Genesis on multiple different occasions.
Boy, if I had $1 for every time I've told someone I hated them, well, my bank account would be very full. But yes, yeah, it was on 1 or 2 occasions.
It was on multiple occasions.
Yes.
The defendant told you that she hated Genesis because Genesis was a bad influence on Casey.
Yes.
In fact, the defendant once told you that if she could push a button to make Genesis disappear, she would absolutely do it.
Yes, she did say that. Of course, I think everyone would press a button to get rid of someone they didn't like. I mean, if I could press a button to get rid of my landlord, I would, but it doesn't work that way.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis, but that is a yes to my question. The defendant did make that statement.
Yes.
However, you personally don't believe that the defendant intentionally poisoned Genesis.
Oh, there's no way Harper could ever do something like that. Like I said, she is the most kind person I have ever met.
You would agree with me that the defendant repeatedly said that she hated Genesis so much she hopes the wedding would be called off.
Yes.
Well, and at the winery, you are in charge of the winemaking process.
Yes, I can say I'm the best at what I do.
And Harper mainly focuses on the business side of things.
Yes.
However, you would agree with me that Harper is familiar with where the pesticide is kept at the winery.
Yes, after all, she is in charge of it, but many people are informed about it, like our employees Drew Matazukis and Kirby Doolittle.
But that's a yes to my question. Harper does know where the pesticide is stored?
Yes, along with many other members of our staff.
The defendant even told you she knew the pesticide could be poisonous.
Yes.
Even more so, the defendant said she knew the pesticide could be fatal.
Yes, I mean, I think everyone to a certain degree knows that pesticide can be dangerous.
In fact, the defendant is the one that told you about an employee who had drank a glass of wine and gotten sick in 2018.
Yes.
And that wine had been contaminated with pesticide.
Well, the employee, I mean, our wine is so good that sometimes we have a little bit ourselves, and they happened to leave their wine out while we were doing a spraying. Well, they decided to drink some of it, thinking it wouldn't be a problem. So needless to say, they were severely reprimanded.
So that is a yes to my question, that wine was contaminated.
Yes.
And Harper was the one that told you that the employee had gotten very sick.
Yes.
The defendant was the one that told you that the employee had almost died.
Yes. Luckily, they're still around today.
Well, in fact, the defendant even mentioned that you couldn't tell from looking at the glass that pesticide was mixed in.
No.
The defendant.
She did say that, yes.
The defendant and the defendant even went on to say that you couldn't smell the pesticide in the wine either.
Right.
And you are aware that a bottle of Cara wine was found to be contaminated with pesticides?
Yes, and I can easily explain that. So the bottle of wine happened to be thrown away into the same trash can our pesticides were thrown away in. And so whenever it was tested, it was found to have levels of pesticide in it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. But you'd agree with me that you supervised every spraying Peony Estates did, correct?
Yes.
And you are not aware of a single occasion where any pesticide containers leaked or spilled?
Not to my knowledge. I can't say that there was any instances.
In fact, besides that one employee, no one else has ever gotten sick from one of your wines.
No. Our wine is the best that Rapper River Valley Midlands has to offer.
Now, Mr. Lewis, I want to talk a little bit about why you're here today. You would agree that you currently own 10% of Peony Estates?
Yes.
And you would agree with me that if the defendant were to lose this lawsuit, the winery will also likely shut down?
Yes, but I think I have the capability to find a job wherever I want. After all, I am a do-it-all employee.
You would agree with me that if the winery were to shut down, you would be out of a lot of money?
Yes, but like I said, I always land on my feet.
Mr. Lewis, you would agree with me that losing Peony Estates is the last thing you want to happen?
Oh no, I mean, yeah, it's the last thing I would want to happen. I mean, Peony Estates offers the best wines in sorry, Rapid Valley Midlands. So of course I wouldn't want Peony Estates to shut down. I
Thank you,
mean,
Mr. Lewis. I have no
the
further.
public needs to have, sorry, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
The public just needs to have access to our wine.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I have no further questions at this time.
Defense,
Brief redirect, Your Honor.
you may.
Mr. Lewis, just to clear a few things up, where was that bottle of Cara wine found?
It was found where it was originally stored or where it was found?
Where it was found by the police.
It was found in a trash can along with a pesticide container where we throw away our pesticides.
So how did the pesticide get into the bottle?
Well, if the bottle had been opened, which it was, and the
Objection.
pesticide was thrown away, it had its.
Objection, Your Honor, to speculation.
What was the question?
The question
How
was,
did the pesticide get into the bottle?
So your response is?
It is within Mr. Lewis's rationally based perception that if a bottle of wine was thrown into a trash can that was also filled with pesticide, that pesticide would end up on that bottle.
Your Honor, may I be heard on those grounds?
Yeah.
Witnesses can testify to what they see or what they know for sure. However, that is incredibly speculatory that because the pesticide was found in the trash, it was also, that is how it got into the wine. That is not a proven fact in today's case, and that is the exact definition of speculation.
And you're asking how it got in there, not how he thinks it got in there, how he.
Yes, Your Honor.
No, I'm going to sustain that.
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, may I rephrase the question?
You may try.
How do you think the pesticide got into the bottle?
Objection, Your Honor, to lack of personal knowledge.
I'm going to sustain it.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Lewis, once again, where was the bottle found?
It's
Objection, Your
found in
Honor.
a trash can along with other pesticides.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. At this time, the defense has no further questions, and we'd ask that our witness be able to step down.
You may be excused. Call your next witness.
At this time, the defense calls Casey Soto to the stand.
All right, you're sworn. Miss Grace can proceed.
Hi, please state your name for the court.
My name is Casey Soto.
And how are you related to this case?
I am the daughter of Harper Martini, who owns Peony Estates, and I was the fiance of Genesis Petrillo.
So how are you connected with Peony Estates?
Being the daughter of Harper Martini, I visited Peony Estates often. It was pretty much my second home. It was my idea to make it a bed and breakfast, and I spent all of my time volunteering there in the summers. So I'm familiar with everything except formal training.
Now, being the daughter of the defendant, does that shape your testimony at all?
No, I didn't want to testify today. I was forced, I was subpoenaed.
Now, I'd like to talk about your relationship with Genesis. When did you two first meet?
We met back in 2012 at my ex, Drew Matazoukis's party. Ironic, right? Genesis and I met by the beer pong table. He was a little tipsy, but we got lunch a week later, and then we were dating within the month.
What happened in 2018?
Genesis had just graduated with his PhD, and he proposed to me a month later. It was a really good year for us.
Now, were there any issues at the engagement?
There weren't any at first. Genesis was always one of those guys that was liked by everybody. I mean, he was even liked by my ex, so it seemed. The only one who had outward issues with him was my mom, Harper, which was my fault, really.
What do you mean that was your fault?
So they both have really big personalities, and I didn't want to introduce Genesis to my mom before I knew it was serious. So when I finally decided that it was serious and I wanted to introduce them, I had forgot to mention that my mom owned Peony Estates, So Genesis actually put his foot in his mouth and insulted my mom's place of business and their wine.
Did you still choose to go forward with the wedding?
Oh, of course. I'm an independent woman. I know and trust my decisions with my relationship, and Genesis was the love of my life. I was going to marry him regardless of what my mother thought.
So how did the wedding planning go then?
It was stressful. I mean, it was fine. At first, Genesis and I wanted to have our wedding at Rosie and Pedro's winery, which was where we had met. But my mom wanted us to have it at Peony Estates, so we switched locations.
How did Genesis feel about that?
He was apprehensive at first, which I understood, but even he couldn't argue. I mean, my mom had gave us a big discount if we had moved it to Peony Estates, and it was a really good deal.
So what happened after you secured the venue?
My mom took over the wedding planning. Wedding planning is not my forte.
Now I'd like to talk about the rehearsal dinner. Were there any tensions at the rehearsal dinner?
You know, I thought there was going to be, but there actually wasn't. I made it clear to my mom that she needed to bury the hatchet with Genesis. Genesis was going to be my husband. And she actually gave everyone in the wedding party their own bottle of wine. Most people got the 2017 Horizon bottle, but my mom presented Genesis with the very first bottle of 2019 Cara wine. It was a really sweet and tender moment. I gave her a smile from across the room to let her know that I was very thankful for this gesture.
And what did you do after that?
Well, at that point, it was 10:30. I was very exhausted. I had a huge day the next day, or so I thought. So I kissed Genesis goodnight, and I went to bed. And, that was the last time I saw him alive.
What happened whenever you woke up?
I woke up at around 7 a.m. Getting ready. About a half an hour later or so, my mom comes in saying that Genesis is nowhere to be found. At this point, I wasn't super worried. I knew Genesis was going to come back.
What happened next?
Well, Angel comes running in. And before I could think about how weird it was that she was wearing the exact same clothes as the night before, I heard Genesis and then coma. And so I raced out the door.
What did you do following that?
Well, I just got to the hospital as fast as I could. I cursed every red light, and I was praying for a text from Genesis saying that he was okay. But I was too late.
Too late?
5 minutes earlier, before I arrived, Genesis passed away. Genesis died alone in a hospital room, and I couldn't even be by his side.
I'm so sorry, Ms. Soto, but I only have a few more questions. Do you know anyone who could have potentially had bad blood with Genesis?
I don't know. My ex? I don't know.
Did Genesis and your mother's relationship seem to be improving?
Objection, Your Honor, as to speculation.
Response, Your Honor.
Yeah.
As Casey is the daughter of the defendant and was the fiance of Genesis Petrillo, I believe this would not be speculation because they have intimate knowledge of what the relationship was like between the two. They lived it every day.
Overruled.
Would you like me to re-ask? Yes. Now, did you feel like the relationship between Genesis and your mother was improving?
I did. Between my mom wanting to have the most perfect wedding for her only child, her only daughter, and the fact that a bad wedding would look bad on the business. I mean, there was absolutely, I can't think of any reason why Harper would do this. I don't want to think that she would hurt me like that.
So do you think your mother had anything to do with Genesis's death?
I don't want to think that she would.
Thank you, Casey. No further questions.
Plaintiffs?
Yes. May I proceed, Your Honor?
No.
All right. Ms. Soto, I know this might be hard, but I do have a few questions to ask you.
Of course.
I'd like to start off. You are Harper's only child, right?
Yes, I am.
But Harper always had a problem with Genesis, didn't she?
I mean, yeah, she never thought that Genesis was a good role model for me. But that didn't, I mean, it bothered me a little bit, but I was going to marry him regardless.
Now, you got engaged to Genesis in July of 2018, right?
Yes, I did.
But the engagement actually made things between Harper and Genesis worse, didn't it?
Yeah, because my mom wanted us to break up. So when she realized that Genesis was going to marry me, it definitely made it worse.
Right. Now, you and Genesis were going to plan the entire wedding yourself, right?
That was the original plan. We didn't want to burden anybody else with planning a wedding. It's a big deal. So yeah, of course.
You picked out Rosie and Pedro, the local winery.
Yeah, that's where we met.
Now, you were actually going to go through with this until Harper stepped in, right?
My mom offered me a huge discount for going to Peony Estates. I would hardly say that it was a step in. I mean, I know that my mom can be a little bit controlling, but she always has the best intentions.
Well, you'd agree with me that Harper insisted you have your wedding at her winery, the Peony Estates.
Yes, but in that cute little mom way, because like it would be a bonding moment for us as well. So yeah, she insisted, but it wasn't in an aggressive way at all.
Harper insisted because she thought it would be good publicity for the winery, right?
It would be good publicity for the winery for sure. I mean, having your only child. I understand that having your only child getting married at a competitor's winery would look bad. But I mean, yeah, it would be good for business.
All right. Now I'd like to move your attention to the night of the rehearsal dinner. Genesis and Harper did start fighting right away, didn't they?
Yeah, I believe that Genesis was late to the rehearsal dinner, and my mom was not a fan of that. So yes, I believe they did, but it all cleared up by the end.
Mm-hmm. Now, it was around 10 p.m. that Harper started handing out bottles of wine, right?
Yeah. Yes, it was. She was giving a speech. It was very sweet.
Genesis actually received a special bottle, didn't he?
Yeah, he received the 2019 bottle of Cara wine. It was the first one that we produced. And it was like a kind of a special thing.
No one else got this bottle, did they?
I believe that's what I said, yes.
All right, now just to be clear, Ms. Soto, you ate and drank everything that Genesis did that night, right?
I did not. All the food, all of the champagne. Sorry, I'm trying to go through the night. All the food, all the champagne. But the only thing that I didn't drink that he did was the 2019 bottle of Cara wine. He poured 2 glasses, and this was the first time I've seen him pour 2 glasses for himself. But I knew that they weren't for me, so I never drank any of it.
So, Ms. Soto, the only thing that differed between what you ate and drank and what Genesis Petrillo ate and drank that night was the bottle of Cara wine gifted by Harper Martini.
Yes, I believe so.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Briefly, Your Honor, did you have any drinks from the bar, Casey?
I believe it was mostly just champagne. I was really, really tired after that. I mean, it was only a 30-minute span from when Genesis got the bottle of wine to when I went to bed. So there was really no time for me to have champagne and then have more wine. I wanted to be not hungover the next morning for my wedding.
So you went straight to bed and did not continue to drink with Angel and Genesis that night, right?
Yes.
So you wouldn't necessarily know if they had other drinks that you didn't see them drink.
Objection,
correct?
Your Honor. Asked and answered.
Response, Your Honor. Overruled it. Thank you. Would you like me to re-ask the question?
Yes, please.
So you wouldn't necessarily know if they would have had drinks later that you wouldn't have seen.
Oh, no, I have no idea what they drank after I went to bed.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
This witness can be excused, and defense's third witness.
At this time, the defense would like to call Harper Martini to the stand.
All
May I
right,
proceed?
you may.
Please state your name for the court.
Hello, my name is Harper Martini.
And what do you do for a living?
As you all know by now, I am the owner and proprietor of Peony Estates Winery with the last name like Martini. I thought it would have been a little too tongue-in-cheek to go into the liquor business, but I've been in the wine industry for all my life.
Now, do you run Peony Estates alone?
No, I have a staff on hand, including Austin Lewis, Drew Matazukis. I always wanted Casey to take over. She grew up working there on summers, but I now understand it has too many unhappy memories for that to be the case.
Now, why are you here in court today?
I'm here in court because my daughter's fiance, Genesis Petrillo, passed away, and they're saying that I did it, and I'm here to tell you that I never poisoned Genesis Petrillo.
Now, let's talk about your relationship with Genesis Petrillo. When did you first meet Genesis?
I met Genesis in 2012. At the time, I didn't know, but Casey was already dating Genesis. They introduced themselves to me as friends, and I didn't learn they were dating until 2015. But I do understand why Casey kept it from me.
And why is that?
I didn't like Genesis. He wasn't a good influence. I didn't think he was the right person for Casey, and I said that as much when I thought they were friends, so I think it made sense that Casey wouldn't want to immediately tell me they were dating.
Now, when did Casey and Genesis get engaged?
They got engaged at Rosie and Pedro's in 2018, but I wasn't there.
Now, did you ever try to convince Casey to call off the wedding?
Of course. I didn't think that Genesis was the right match, and so I made my concerns upfront and clear to Casey.
And would you tell us about some of those concerns?
Like I said, Genesis, I didn't think was a good person. He wasn't a good influence. He wanted her to just live a little, and it was dangerous and reckless. And I always thought someone like Drew, her best friend since childhood, their ex, would be a better fit. So I still had hope for that.
Did Casey listen to your concerns?
It was clear I had crossed a line, and her standing up for Genesis in that way, it made me realize that this relationship was it for her and that she really needed me to get on board.
So what did you do to show your support?
I hosted another engagement party. I insisted to host the wedding at Peony Estates, and then I also invited Genesis out to lunch to clear the air and make sure we're on the same page.
Now, how was your relationship with Genesis in the weeks leading up to the wedding?
Becoming on board with their marriage did not instantly help all of our issues. There were still all of the frustrations there were before, so our relationship was definitely strained leading up to the marriage, to the wedding.
Well, how was your relationship with Casey at this point?
The wedding planning in general was stressful. That aside, Casey and I were still doing well, but it definitely, I was realizing the squabbles I was having weren't helping anything.
So how are you going to work towards peace?
I had a bottle of Cara wine it was the first of our 2019 blend, but it was actually a blend that Casey and I had worked on together to make. And so I bottled it ahead of time, and I thought it would be a good kind of a symbol of like me and Casey being okay with this marriage. And I was going to present it to Casey at the rehearsal dinner.
Did you give Genesis the wine?
Not directly. I made sure that it was ready to be presented Genesis the night before, And then Sam Arnold was the one who presented the entire wedding party with their wedding gifts.
Now, who was with Genesis that night?
When Genesis wasn't with Casey, he was primarily with Angel Rodriguez and Drew Matazukas, who was also in the wedding party, who I felt bad for.
Why did you feel bad for Drew?
You know, Drew's behavior leading up to the wedding, I've known him. He's been friends with Casey since childhood, and definitely seemed to me like I was correct in the impression that he still had feelings for Casey, and so I'm sure it wasn't
Objection,
easy.
Your Honor, to speculation as to the mindset of Drew.
Response.
Drew has been involved in Harper's life many different times, so I think it's within the witness's rational based perception to
And the
speak
question
on
was,
this. Why did she feel bad for Drew? This is
Your
her
Honor.
own perception of events.
Mr. Caldwell.
Your Honor, the defendant just said that Drew still has feelings for her daughter in some way, and I believe that's going into the mindset of Drew. While the defendant can testify to what she thinks Drew believes or what she saw or heard, to get into the mindset of saying that Drew still has feelings for her daughter is just speculation.
Overruled.
I'm not asking. Okay. Would you like me to re-ask that question, or do you want to finish your answer?
No, I was just going to say that Drew's behavior gave me the impression that he still had feelings.
And what behavior are you referring to?
Leading up to the wedding, Casey and Genesis kept trying to rope him into wedding planning, and he started picking up extra shifts, clearly trying to stay busy. And then the night before the rehearsal dinner, I actually found him alone in the bottling area, and at first thought he was crying.
Now, why were you in the bottling area that night?
This was right after I had a long discussion with Casey on the porch about moving forward with the wedding and continually trying to resolve that piece, which is why I was making sure that the Cara bottle of wine was ready for the caterer to present it the following evening.
Now, did you interact with Drew?
Briefly, I didn't want to intrude. Like I said, I thought he was crying when he first came in, his back was to me and he's kind of hunched over. But he turned around really quickly. And so I noticed a bottle of pesticide at his feet and just told him to make sure that that got back into storage. And the next morning, the pesticide wasn't in the bottling area.
And then what happened?
And then I left the bottling area and got ready for the rehearsal dinner the next day.
So was the rehearsal dinner the last time you ever saw Genesis?
It was. I gave my toast around 10 and retired to bed pretty early after that, until I got a call in the middle of the night.
And what happened after you received that call?
Well, someone told me, I was told that there was a member of the wedding party in the hospital. So I went around to all of the rooms and saw that Genesis was not in his room. I saw the empty bottle of Cara wine. He's a bit of a drinker. My assumption was that he was just going to get his stomach pumped, that he had alcohol poisoning. And would
Objection,
be
Your
back.
Honor, to improper character evidence. May I be heard?
Yeah.
Saying that Genesis was a constant drinker and that he drank more recently, that just goes to show propensity, and thus is improper character evidence.
Your Honor, we're not trying to prove action in conformity, therefore with, we're just asking the witness to retell her own perception of events and what she saw and observed.
Overruled.
Can I continue?
Yeah.
Like I said, he had been drinking throughout the night. I saw the empty bottle of wine. I know that he had stayed and been drinking. So it was my assumption that he had alcohol poisoning and was just going to get his stomach pumped and then be ready for the wedding the next day.
Now, how did this day affect you?
It was the darkest day of my life. I lost my husband myself right before Casey was born, and never would have wanted Casey to go through that pain. If I could have done anything to keep her from feeling that pain, I would have.
Now, what is your relationship with Casey like now?
It is hard to talk about, especially since the lawyers made her get involved, because it's definitely our relationship is no longer good. And I know it's because of this and just not knowing what happened to the love of her life. I mean, there's a lot of pain there, and you can't protect your child from all the pain in the world, but I would have done anything to keep Casey from this type of pain, much less I never, ever would have caused her this kind of pain.
Now, we need to talk about that bottle of Cara wine one more time.
Mm-hmm.
Are you aware that the bottle of Cara wine tested positive for pesticides?
I am.
And do you have any idea why that is?
I can't say for sure. To the best of my knowledge, I know that it was thrown away in a garbage can with other pesticides, so it could have been from there.
And are you aware of anyone tampering with that bottle?
Not that I'm aware of, and I certainly did not.
Now, where was that bottle of Cara wine stored before it was given to Genesis?
In the bottling area.
Now, is this that same bottling area where you saw Drew and the canister of pesticide?
It is, yes.
And who all knew that the bottle of Cara wine was a gift for Genesis?
All of my employees were aware, including Drew Matazoukas.
Is it possible that someone tampered with the bottle while it was on the shelf?
All of the resources to rebottle that wine would have been in that room to do so, but I have no knowledge of that.
Miss Martini, did you tamper with the bottle of wine?
No, I did not.
Thank you. I have no further questions for this witness at this time.
Lance?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Now, Miss Martini, you love your winery more than anything, don't you?
As a statement, I do love my winery, yes.
Well, but
insinuation more than actually anything, no.
Right, but the only thing you love as much as your winery is your daughter Casey, right?
Exactly, yes.
And you would do nothing, or nothing would stop you from protecting your only child, right?
Right, I would never want to cause her any pain or keep her from that.
Right. And you wanted to pass on your winery to Casey one day, right?
Initially, that was the plan.
But then Casey met Genesis.
Yes, and Casey was growing up. It became clear that I found out before the wedding Casey wasn't planning on staying and taking over the winery.
Right, and you immediately saw Genesis as a threat to your business, right?
Genesis was a threat. He made comments to the guests all the time about how much he hated my winery. He gave a false impression to guests that was a threat to my business.
So that's a yes to my question. Mr. Petrillo was a threat to your business?
Yes.
And you also believe that Mr. Petrillo was a bad influence on Casey, right?
I know he was a bad influence on Casey.
And then you found out they were going to be married.
Yes, she told me immediately when they got engaged, yes.
Right, and in May of 2019, you learned that after the wedding, Mr. Petrillo and Casey were going to be moving to France, right?
It was confirmed, yes. I had known that there was a move of some kind when I took Genesis out to lunch, like I said.
Well, let's be clear, Miss Martini, you learned this via a voicemail message, right?
I learned about the move at the lunch, and then it was confirmed that it was France specifically in a voicemail message, yes.
So, and you would recognize a transcript of this voicemail if I showed it to you today?
Yes, it was a very hurtful message.
At this time, Exhibit 8, which has already been pre-admitted in evidence, should be showing up on screen. Now, read with me, or read along as I read. I'm going to Paris after the wedding. You'll never see me again. Congrats. Oh, there's a catch, though. Casey's coming with me. Casey doesn't want you to know, doesn't want to upset fragile little Harper. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did. As you can see, he spoke to me like I was nothing. It was very hurtful.
Right, and as you said on direct, you were upset by this.
I didn't want him to, yes, the thought that he would ever speak to a woman that way, the thought that he'd speak to Casey that way was very, it was very upsetting.
Right, and after hearing this voicemail, you wanted nothing more than to stop the wedding, right?
Yes. I wanted
And
them
you-
to break up. I never wanted them to get engaged in the first place.
Right, and you called Genesis back the next day.
Yes.
And you told Genesis that, again, there was nothing you wouldn't do to protect your only child.
Yeah, yes. Of course, I didn't poison him. I mean,
Well, we'll get to that, Miss Martini. In late May of 2019, you wrote a note to Genesis and closed with a check for $300,000, right?
yes, I wanted him to leave Casey.
Right, and you would recognize this note if I showed it to you today.
Of course.
At this time, Exhibit 24 should be showing up on the screen. Now, this is the note that you wrote, right, Miss Martini?
Yes.
And this is your handwriting?
Yes.
And it's a fair and accurate copy?
Yes, I believe it is.
At this time, plaintiff moves Exhibit 24 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Admitted.
Right. Now, in this note, it says, take the $300,000 and leave, or you would do things the hard way, right?
Yes, and Casey took that Genesis took the $300,000, which is why I was under the impression he was going to continue to leave.
Well, let's be clear, Miss Martini, the note didn't work.
He took the $300,000. I was under the impression the note had worked.
You were under the impression the note had worked, but Mr. Petrillo threw the note right back at you.
Yes, but not the $300,000 check. Like, he kept the money, so I knew he was upset. I mean, our arguing wasn't new, but when he kept the money and decided to take the check, I assumed he would leave at some point.
Well, but let's be clear, he didn't leave, did he?
No, but that happened on the 7th.
Now, I want to talk to you about the wedding rehearsal. On that day, you decided to put a plan you had into action, right?
I mean, it was just giving a wedding gift to Casey and the wedding party in Genesis.
So that's a yes to my question.
I mean, the entire plan of the wedding, yes.
And that plan consisted, as you said, of giving Mr. Petrillo a bottle of Cara wine during the wedding rehearsal, right?
Yes, the blend that Casey and I had made together.
But on the day of the wedding rehearsal, you brought this bottle of Cara into the kitchen, right?
Yes, Sam Arnold was the one who presented it. So it was in the kitchen in preparation with the other Horizon bottles.
Right, and you told Sam Arnold that this bottle of wine was only for Genesis, right?
Yes.
And it was to be given out during your speech?
After my toast, correct.
Now, as you stated on direct, you learned around 2:30 in the morning that someone from Peonia Estates had been rushed to the hospital.
Yes.
And you immediately suspected Genesis had been poisoned.
That's incorrect. I went around to the rooms, and upon seeing the empty bottle of wine and that Genesis wasn't there, I thought that Genesis had alcohol poisoning.
Is it, so that's a yes to my question? You immediately thought Genesis had been poisoned?
I guess that's still yes.
Now, you were in court today when Angel Rodriguez testified, right?
I was.
And Angel Rodriguez never saw Drew go anywhere near the kitchen, right?
I don't think, as far as I can tell, Angel never said anything about Drew's movements throughout the night.
Right, and the caterer, Sam Arnold, you were here when she testified.
Yes.
And you were here when she never mentioned Drew anywhere near the kitchen.
No, but there wouldn't be an issue with them going to the kitchen. The issue was I found Drew in the bottling area the night before.
And you know that wine and pesticide is odorless, right?
Yes.
And you know that wine and pesticide is tasteless, right?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions at this time.
Does that conclude any? Well, I think you're out of time. I don't know if that applies.
Yeah, no redirect, Your Honor.
So that concludes the defense's case in chief. Am I right?
That's correct. We ask that this witness can step down.
Right. You may be excused. And do we need anything before closing arguments breaks? Anything? Are we going right to it?
Yes, Your Honor. Plaintiff would like to ask for a brief 5 to 10 minute recess if time permits.
Yeah, let's come back at 12:20.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. whoever's doing closing, if you can just show your video so I know when you're both ready.
I'm ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Plaintiff is ready to proceed as well.
All right, so we're gonna hear closing statements from each party, and I want everyone to make sure their view is on speaker view for this, and we may proceed.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. A desperate plan gone too far. Now, at the very beginning of today's trial, my co-counsel, Ms. Turner, stood before you today and told you we're the plaintiff in today's case. And that means that we hold the burden of proof. And we had to prove two things to you today. One, that the defendant intentionally poisoned the bottle of Caro wine with the intention to harm Mr. Petrillo. And two, that the contents of that wine and the pesticides found in the bottle were the direct cause of Mr. Petrillo's death. And our burden of proof today is more likely than not. And that simply means that if you're 50.001% sure that the defendant poisoned that wine, that's enough. That's liable in the state of Midlands. Let's talk about the defendant poisoning wine. You heard today from Angel Rodriguez, a member of the wedding party, that the defendant was seen carrying a can of pesticides to the kitchen the day of the rehearsal, the rehearsal dinner. Now, after making snide remarks like the pesticides are to kill pests like Genesis, the defendant took that can into the kitchen where conveniently wedding gifts were being prepared. Wedding gifts comprising of bottles of wine. And every single person at the wedding rehearsal received a bottle of Horizon wine, except for one. There was one bottle of Caro wine that, as the defendant put herself, was only meant for Genesis. Only for Genesis to drink, only for Genesis to pour, and only Genesis got sick. Angel Rodriguez later told you that she saw Mr. Petrillo drink several glasses of wine from this bottle of Caro and immediately show symptoms of slurred speech, lack of coordination, and profuse sweating. Mr. Petrillo's symptoms, they wouldn't get better as the night went on. In fact, they worsened until Mr. Petrillo passed out in his room and had to be rushed to the hospital. But what was the defendant doing while Mr. Petrillo was fighting for his life? Well, she went up to Mr. Petrillo's room, saw the empty bottle of Caro on the floor, and threw it in the trash. That bottle would later test positive for organophosphate pesticides, the same type of pesticides that were found in Mr. Petrillo's stomach contents and his blood. Now, we know that the wine was poisoned, but why would the defendant poison her own wine? Now, you've heard today from every witness, from Sam Arnold, the caterer, to the defendant's own daughter, Casey Soto, that the relationship between the defendant and Mr. Petrillo was not good, and that is putting it lightly. The defendant constantly made jabs at Mr. Petrillo and always wanted Mr. Petrillo out of her life. Their relationship reached a boiling point when the defendant received a voicemail from Mr. Petrillo saying that Mr. Petrillo and Casey were moving to Paris and that the defendant would never see her grandkids again and that they wanted nothing to do with the defendant after the wedding. Now, as the defendant said herself, this greatly upset her. And so what did the defendant do? What was the best course of action? She wrote a check for $300,000 and enclosed it in a note saying that if you don't leave, I'm going to take you out the hard way. The note didn't work, and Mr. Petrillo stayed for the wedding. And that is when the defendant put her last plan into action, a desperate plan that went too far. The defendant took pesticides into the kitchen, mixed it into the bottle of Caro wine, and gave it to Mr. Petrillo for only him to drink. Now, I know battery might sound like someone punching someone else in the face or an assault of some kind. But members of the jury, the second that the defendant put pesticides in that wine and that wine touched Mr. Petrillo's lips, that is battery in the state of Midlands. And what better way to cancel the wedding of your son-in-law that you hate so much than to get him sick with odorless and tasteless pesticides in wine and cause the wedding to be canceled? Now, it is not our contention today that the defendant wanted to kill Mr. Petrillo, but she definitely wanted to make him sick enough to cancel the wedding and to get her daughter back. But that's not what happened. After Mr. Petrillo drank that wine, he fell into a coma. And as Dr. Kwan stood before you today, he told you that the defendant, or that Mr. Petrillo's blood and stomach contents showed the same organophosphate pesticides that the defendant and Peonia Estates regularly use. There was no other cause of Mr. Petrillo's death other than pesticides that were found in his blood that caused him to slip into a coma and die. Now, after you go into that deliberation room, I know you'll find the only verdict that evidence supports, and that's liable for battery, because the defendant, she had a plan. It was a desperate plan that went too far. Thank you.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
May.
Beware the dangers of a single-story narrative. Single-story narratives can lead to snap judgments, biases, and injustices. The plaintiff wants you to be ignorant to the other facts and truths of the story, but it is your duty to see past their single-story narrative. In situations like this, people are quick to point fingers and place blame. But these people want closure, and we want that closure for them. However, charging an innocent woman with battery is not the way to go about finding that closure. Harper Martini was the easiest target available, and therefore the blame was placed on her. But the real Harper is not the person that the plaintiff crafted to fit their single-story narrative. In blaming Harper, the plaintiff failed to consider other options. The plaintiff has the burden of proof, which is a preponderance of evidence for our trial today. It is your job to determine whether or not they have met this burden before you make a decision that will forever affect the lives of so many people. The plaintiff has told you that the preponderance of evidence means that you are more certain than not that battery has taken place at the hands of Harper Martini. But we want you to consider the testimonies that took place in court today. First, we heard from Austin Lewis. He has worked for Harper Martini for the past 5 years. He testified that Harper is a joy to work with and to be around. She was always kind. He also testified about how the employee-only facilities, including where the bottle of wine was kept, was very accessible to all employees of Peonia Estates, or even anyone who put any effort into getting into the building. Also, they testified that the Cara bottle could have tested positive for pesticide because it was in the trash can alongside all the other pesticides. Next, we heard from Casey Soto, who is actively grieving the death of Genesis. Casey loved Genesis more than anything. And when you love someone, you want justice. But Casey recognizes that charging an innocent woman with battery is not justice. She testified that Harper and Genesis were going to make things work despite their tensions out of their mutual love for Casey. Casey stated that her mother would never harm anyone. It would certainly never do anything to crush her like that. And finally, we heard from defendant Harper Martini. She spoke of her relationship with Genesis and how she'd been actively trying to make amends. She testified that she saw Drew Matsukas alone in the bottling room with the Cara wine with pesticide at his feet and seemed distressed. Drew knew who the bottle was for and had access to it. Harper also talked about losing her husband, the love of her life, and how she would never want Casey to feel the pain of losing the love of their life. Even the plaintiff admitted in their opening that Harper loved Casey more than anything. She would never hurt her. Harper also testified that things are difficult now between her and Casey. so she would also never do anything to jeopardize her relationship with her daughter. First, the plaintiff brought up Angel Rodriguez. Angel talked quite a bit about the relationship between Harper and Genesis and Casey. But who is better to testify as to the relationship? A friend of one of the parties involved, or the significant other of one party and the child of the other? Angel or Casey? Casey is much more qualified to discuss the relationship, and she did exactly that in court today. Angel testified that they were merely an observer in the situation between Harper and Genesis, and they didn't have the entire story. Also, oddly enough, Drew was not concerned about Genesis' behavior that night, even though he's known Genesis for longer. Angel was also impeached on the stand, so they have the tendency to contradict facts in order to further their story. You also heard from another plaintiff witness, Dr. Jimin Kwan. Kwan stated that they're on the board of directors of Doctors for Organic Solutions, an organization that advocates against the use of pesticide. They're hoping that the outcome of this case will influence legislators to ban pesticides. They have a direct bias in this case. Also, the cure to organophosphate poisoning did not save Genesis's life. Genesis had an extremely high blood alcohol content and was exhibiting all the signs of alcohol poisoning. However, Kwan did not treat them for alcohol poisoning. Kwan also provided no evidence that Harper Petrillo committed this crime. They know nothing about the circumstances that led to Genesis's death. Finally, we heard from Sam Arnold. They testified that, similar to Angel, they were merely an observer to the relationship between the three. They didn't even know all the details about the relationship, let alone see anyone poison the Cara wine. In fact, they didn't even see Genesis ingest the Cara wine specifically. Their testimony was not able to add anything of substance to this case today. Now consider all the testimony that you've heard today. Think about more than just the single story narrative that you were initially presented with. There are other far more likely options that the plaintiff failed to consider. For instance, Drew Matsukas could have put organophosphates in Genesis's drink. Drew worked alongside Harper in the winery every single day. Drew had access to every inch of Peony Estates, and Drew was in the winery all throughout the wedding weekend. Drew also had the motive to poison Genesis. Drew has known Casey since they were children and developed a very close relationship. They even used to date. Additionally, Harper wanted Casey to take on the winery after her, and Casey would have run that winery with Drew. Hypothetically, they would have had a wonderful life together. However, if the wedding between Genesis and Casey had taken place, Casey would have been whisked off to France. Without Casey in Midlands, when the time to retire came, Harper may have sold the winery, leaving Drew's job security at the mercy of a new owner. Therefore, the poisoning of Genesis would help ensure that that situation would never take place. Besides, Drew had a great scapegoat in Harper. We hope you looked past the single story narrative and are considering all the truths when making your decision. The plaintiff did not adequately prove that Genesis died of organophosphate poisoning, let alone at the hand of Harper Martini. After today's case, we know that you all will realize that Harper Martini is solely a convenient target. I beseech you to look past their single story narrative and see the truths and the stories that the plaintiff ignored. A case can never be determined by a single story. That's when the justice that the justice system stands for is most easily manipulated. Don't let the plaintiff trick you into taking their desperate plan too far by manipulating justice solely because they found a convenient target. Find Harper Martini not liable. Thank you.
Rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Members of the jury, what is more likely than not? Now, you heard today from Casey Soto, who never saw Drew near any of the bottling areas. You heard from Angel Rodriguez, who never saw Drew near any of the bottling areas. And you heard the same thing from Austin Lewis and from Sam Arnold. Who is the one person who said anything about Drew being anywhere near that bottle of Cara? The defendant herself. The defendant wants to cover up her plan that went too far. The defendant poisoned that wine to cancel the wedding between her hated son-in-law and her daughter, who she wanted to protect and carry on the winery after she was gone. that is what is more likely than not. So I know that you'll go into the deliberation room and find Harper Martini liable for battery. Thank you.
Okay. I think we're going to be submitting our ballots, so I'm going to ask everyone to stay on until we have submitted them. And the scoring judges, if you two can get together when you're both done, you can message each other on here and then text that number once you both submitted yours and just let me know, or because I think the tournament staff will text you back. So.
Hey y'all, if y'all could go on gallery view really quick, just so we can kind of put a face to the name. I know a lot of y'all have like your characters' names on there, just so we can put those on there for the ballots. Thanks, y'all. I know this is super awkward. Awesome. Thanks, guys. I don't know if Byron still needs y'all, but.
No, I'm good. I have it as going. Hey, Amber, I sent you a direct chat. I don't know if you can see it among all the timing notices.
And just so we're on the same page, I'm just going over like comments that I've written, and then I'll fill out one online later.
Adam, do you know when we're supposed to do feedback? Because I know they probably have another round soon too.
Right. It just said to give, after we submit our ballots, we'll get a text. Do you have that sheet that says to text that number when you're done with your ballot?
I do not.
I can text it when you're both done.
Okay, because I submitted, so.
Oh yeah, similarly, I'm submitted and it has filled in a ballot code if that's something you need.
Same.
It says it's asking you to fill one in.
No, I think
No.
it's locked now, but it's just for them to tabulate. I think it's going to be for their scoring room.
Yeah.
Or I don't know what to call this so they know which one it is. I guess I'll just put the team numbers.
Things are happening that were not on the PowerPoint, Adam.
I didn't attend those, and then I was watching the YouTube this morning, but like this is starting. I don't know how many things I got wrong.
All right. So I tend to follow the things. This round is good. You're good to give comments.
We're good.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
When I monitor the ballots and when I see they're in, but I haven't heard yet, I'll go to the YouTube link, and I saw that you were having that discussion, so I figured I'll just come in and let you know you're good to go.
Yeah, thank you very much, Elliot. We were wondering, like, what are we supposed to do now?
If you're judging again, just my number is on like 17 different documents. Just text me.
Okay.
That's the best way when the ballots are in, and then I can just shoot back. They're good to go.
And do we have time for comments? Are we strapped for time?
Try and keep it to like 10 minutes. We do have another round in about an hour and a half. So there's not, it's not a super short window, but just try and keep it 10, 15 minutes so
Yeah.
we can get to lunch.
That's fine. So I guess everyone can come in if you want to show yourselves, or if not, that's fine too.
Are they allowed to tell us what school they're from now? Are we allowed to know?
I don't think
We're not
so.
doing. Oh,
Some people might be judging several rounds, and yeah.
oh, I guess that would be right because I'm judging all the rounds. So
Yeah, I'm
That
judging
would be
again.
awkward.
I don't want to know.
Does anyone? My thoughts are kind of all over the place. I haven't filled out the actual comment form, so I'm sure you all get those. But I'll go through a couple things that stand out on here.
yeah. Do you want to introduce yourself really quick, Adam? That
Yeah,
way they can kind of.
my name is Adam Heron. I went to Baylor Law School, graduated 2014, and I do fiduciary litigation in Austin. So kind of this, which is funny because last year's problem was also, or maybe it was Top Gun, but it was like, yeah. Probate thing. And so this is sort of what I do, although not so much in the battery context, but you know, dead people for sure. Everyone else, you want? Amber?
Yeah. Hey y'all. So my name's Amber Hernandez, and I am currently in my last quarter at Baylor Law School. I was doing my JD MBA there. I also went to Baylor undergrad, so all the Bears. And I, funny enough, I actually didn't make the mock trial team in undergrad. But I actually am on, I was on AAJ last spring as a 2L, and then I was on Tournament of Champions with Baylor Law School, and then I'm on AAJ in the spring. So I somehow figured out how to do it.
Byron?
Yeah, so I'm Byron Haney. I am 3L, 6th, 7th quarter. I've quit counting. I'm in practice court, so life's hell.
Exactly.
But I came to law late, so I earned my master's degrees and undergraduates back in the last century. Yeah, I guess that's what you needed to know in terms of where I'm coming from.
Okay.
Byron, you were on a team too. Don't leave that out.
Oh, well, yes. I did the Turo moot court and the ABA's National Arbitration Competition mock trial.
There you go.
So first of all, let me just say I'm always impressed
Yes.
by, especially, you know, undergrads doing this. So it's, wait, am I getting that wrong? Yeah, I'm getting that wrong.
Yeah, they're all undergrads.
They're all undergrads.
Oh, so I was right. Okay.
Yes, you're good.
Yes, impressive. I'm just going to go through things that stand out here. And you all did good. And, you know, I went to Baylor. They go to Baylor. You kind of train to just point out the bad. You're gonna get no compliments from any of these people probably, because that's assumed. You're all good. So we're gonna go over the things that maybe need work. The opening by the defense, so Jazz Wolf, correct? I liked the whole. So normally the more than 50% thing sounds a little strange to me, but I think it made sense and worked here because you're saying there's 6 different stories. I would have maybe drilled home the point that you need to find the one they're saying, was more than 50%, but mind you, there's 6 stories floating out here. Let's see. One thing I was confused about was plaintiff's first witness, I believe, talked about how Angel Rodriguez talked about how you could smell the poison. And am I wrong on that? I thought she was talking about how you can smell it. And then after that, the plaintiffs kept highlighting the fact that it's odorless, you can't smell it. So is that just kind of something you have to deal with in the documents, I'm guessing? Nod.
I didn't remember that, but if she did say that, that is not in the affidavit. So
did she say that, or am I making that up?
No, she did.
Okay. Yeah, I was, because it made sense at one point, but then the whole, there's no smell, it's odorless. But anyway, yeah, so pounce on that next time, or correct her, I guess. Great accent, unless Sam Arnold's actually French. The hat, classic. Sometimes, I get annoyed with asked and answered because it's like you're wasting more time by objecting than just letting it slip. But if they're just repeating something over and over again, and I will just say that I let a lot of speculative, crazy things in on purpose, and sometimes it can benefit you. You want to object, right? And for purposes of this, you've got to object to objectionable things, but just in real life, you got to choose your battles. And sometimes, I let them say something speculative, like, where is it? Harper Martini just seems so self-serving. And so when she's speculating, like, well, it could have been contaminated, tampered with no basis in it. It kind of just works in your favor because it looks like she's just pointing fingers and grasping at straws. So, but I know you've got to object and don't stop objecting just because I'm overruling you. You've got to keep preserving error. So just keep it up no matter what I'm doing. One thing I was unclear about, because it seemed pretty clear that the pesticides were, I guess, in him, but it's that maybe that's not what killed him. So I was wondering, well, I guess there's no doubt he consumed pesticides, right? That's known. And I guess did it come from this wine? Was it the cause of his death? I was just a little confused because at the beginning it seemed like everyone agreed that was his cause of death, and then it was kind of going into alcohol poisoning and whatnot. But that that could just be a mix of two sides battling, and that's just where I was left with confusion. But it's just important to make these really clear about what the story is, and I don't think on the defense's side it really came through until the end that maybe his cause of death wasn't this. And maybe you just want to embrace it that okay, maybe he did die from that, but it wasn't us.
I think that's something that y'all should definitely include in your opening if that's the route you're going to go, because y'all did a really good job of I guess it was kind of argumentative, but I wouldn't have objected in your opening of negating the plaintiff's witnesses and kind of discrediting him. It was almost to where I would maybe object argumentative, but you did a good job. I would just kind of maybe throw in the fact that it could have been something else in the opening, because then it gets it in the judge's mind so that they can keep that throughout. Because when I heard that in closing, when it was or someone said something or another, and I was like, wait, what? And then it was too far gone for me to kind of go back and kind of pick that up and where y'all dropped those hints. Sorry, Aaron, I kind of took over, but.
Oh no, that's one thing. And I don't know if this is just your team's policies or what. I thought it was kind of more badass when someone's directing and the other opposing lawyer is there visible. Some of you didn't appear, some of you did. I thought it was good to, make yourself seen. But I don't know if that's an internal rule among teams or what. I just saw it different. I think the plaintiffs were always visible, defense not necessarily.
Yeah, I think that was a big thing. It also helped y'all when y'all want to object, like be quicker to object, because like some of them were like very delayed to where the witness was able to spit out the answer before Aaron was able to hear, or Adam was able to hear objection. And so you kind of like lost that little like oomph. And so I think maybe, I don't know if it is a rule or not, but if y'all can do that and just stay on, because then they can see you, or the judge can see you waving your hand of like objection, or like raising your hand objection, and then they're able to stop the witness before the witness actually says something. We just did a competition on Zoom, like ours was all via Zoom. It was a lot, but I think like some of the big things is if y'all are sitting, I can see y'all's eyes moving if y'all are reading things, because y'all are closer to the camera, so I can like watch your eyes move. So just be cognizant of that. And that's one of the things where like when we give openings and closings, like we stand away, and when we direct, we stand away from the camera. We figured that out. Like we have something that's like blown up like 200% size of like our bullet points or whatever on our screen, but we have like, we're standing away so they can't see us reading. So it looks like we have things memorized, but like we really don't. But another thing that I was thinking in the land of Zoom would just be, where is it? I guess not even just not. Oh, y'all are like looking at the screen when you're directing, when you're cross-examining a lot, instead of looking at the dot, which I know is really annoying. But just as like when we have you on like speaker view and it's just y'all two, like we can kind of see, and y'all are just like staring down at someone. What I've learned is I kind of take the Zoom thing and pull it all the way up to like the closest to the dot possible. And I pull it in like a panel view. So they're up there as close as possible. So if I'm seeing their picture, I'm like still kind of looking at the screen to where it doesn't look like I'm like looking down at them. It just helps with like eye contact and stuff. And like when you're watching it on trial, like you're like, oh, they're looking at me. So like they're paying attention. But other than that, I think just being confident when y'all are objecting or responding. I mean, fake it till you make it. It could be a very wrong like answer or response, but if you're confident, then I'm like, oh, they know their shit. Like that, maybe that is right. So if y'all can just do that. And I think just finding ways to take witnesses' answers and twist them. Because it's like we practice these directs and crosses so much that we're like, I know my next question, but like if they give you nuggets, like someone gave you like the most kind person, like she's the most kind person, you're like, oh, she's kind, but yet she just admitted on direct that she hates people openly. Like, so kind people can hate people, and like you can kind of like twist that. Or another one, that she wanted us to break up. So then if you're like, so if you're hearing that from them of like wanting us to break up, then like develop that, because then you can kind of get them, and like it gets fun when you get to like take what their words are, and then you're like, well, you just said that, so can we not trust what you're saying? But just things like that. But like overall, like y'all are really, really impressive. That was a really fun thing to watch. So
yeah, and one of the just along the lines of picking battles, I think it was Mr. Caldwell crossing Harper, and he said something like, did Genesis damage your business? And she said yes and more, right? I mean, she went ahead and like, yeah, he's destroying my business, he's a piece of shit. And then you said, so the answer is yes. And I know like, the knee jerk is to control the answer, but yeah, of course she's saying yes. So let her go. We're saying she killed this guy. So she wants to add more to it. Yeah, just leave it. Let her go. Let's see what else.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm kind of a fan of like not like, it's like at a certain point then you want to say like my answer, like it's a yes or no answer, but like let them run on, because that's when like if they open their mouth, like they don't realize what's coming out, and then you get more really fun things.
I would have
And
liked
on
to
that,
hear more about Drew, and that's last. I'll let Byron go.
Yeah.
well, no, I was just gonna say on the yes or no answer, and if y'all get the comments, I did a really good job of writing it all down. I'm not gonna try to read it to you, but one of y'all on your cross spoke to the witness and said, like, hey, I need you to answer these questions, yes or no, and then you promptly asked 3 non-leading, non-yes or no questions in a row. And that just doesn't work. Like, if you're going to try to box the witness in to having to say yes or no, make sure that all of the questions you're asking can be answered yes or no. The other thing is, coming from Baylor, we're all about the different advocacy stuff. You did really well on your cross, right? And this is the answer, correct? Get your point across, but it also, just doesn't necessarily tell your story as well as crafting a question that they have to answer without you saying what you want them to say, right? Because that just kind of comes off as begging the question almost. Overall, a lot of y'all are just way rehearsed, way reading stuff, and and I guess it was Casey and Harper. Y'all need to teach a class on how to not be rehearsed, and how to actually seem like you actually lived this stuff, because that was fantastic in terms of that. And I guess just because I just went through this experience in my mock trial thing a couple of weekends ago, this is judged on the basis of presentation. This is judged on the basis of how good and how well y'all know what you're doing. It's not necessarily judged on the merits. So at my ABA competition, we actually had 4 different judges say, y'all creamed them, but that's not how we judge this. So this is not on the merits. This is on how well it's all done. So, or how well the presentation of it all goes. So don't look at the results or anything and feel like, man, I don't know what I'm doing, because I'm probably, well, I don't know what's in the minds of the other 2 judges, but I'm telling y'all right now that in my opinion, the team that's going to win this round is not the team that proved their case.
And speaking of that, yet, like, it has nothing to do with who would win this lawsuit, but just a tip for it, because this is how you're scored. I don't buy the idea, and this didn't match the evidence that, in closing, they're saying Harper's, so innocent and trying to have a good relationship with Genesis and blah, 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 and getting people to say she's the most kind. Like, don't, that's not true for anyone. And it's definitely not true for this woman. So, don't, just because they're saying she's horrible doesn't mean you say she's the best. Just be real.
And maybe to that point, it's like pick your battles. When you're on the defense, you just have to upset one of the things that they have to prove. You don't have to turn around and prove that she's a saint. I listened to the closing and a lot of the cross talking about whether this guy was poisoned or not, and I'm sitting here convinced he was poisoned.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, obviously this guy is dead. It seems like he's dead from something that's not just wine. I don't care anymore. What I care about is it the person that they say it was? So just, you get so much credibility with the jury, with the judge, when you come up and be like, yes, this guy is dead. They are right, but it wasn't Harper. So that's one thing to think about too, as you're, designing your closing or designing your cross, is what are the points that you want to argue about?
Yeah, and I think one other thing, just as y'all are going and doing these rounds and stuff, and just trying to tweak different things or try different things, the 2 biggest pieces of advice that I got from Professor Fraley, I used to, our mock trial coach told me I had one tone, and it was a tone that he said he was either so aggressive that I was like a bulldog, or that I wanted to put him to sleep. And he was like, there was no in between. And so I had to learn how to vary my tones and stuff. And I would just say, with the experts and stuff, and with other witnesses, y'all can y'all can smile. like y'all don't have like lawyers, like we really aren't like super serious. Like y'all need to like smile and like kind of try and be personal, because like at the end of the day, it's like how the jury views you. And if they view you as like this stone cold person, like they're gonna be like, oh, I wouldn't be friends with this person. Like, why am I gonna like be on their side? So just kind of like take that into consideration. And just, I think with experts, like y'all can like try and say like, hey, can you dumb it down? Like for those of us who aren't experts in whatever, like, can you like kind of tell us what that is? So that way you're like relating with the jury, and then like being able to like get them, like, you're like, we don't know what that is, but like just different moments where y'all can kind of be more personable and like show that it doesn't need to be super serious the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, and to that, don't lose sight of the fact that everything you do is advocacy, not just the words. I can't see your names because I have a tiny screen, but there was one of y'all who just doesn't look like you want to be here. You know, you're frowning, you know, all that counts. And maybe your camera is black. If there's another person with a black and white camera, maybe that's a thing because your camera's messed up or whatever. Doesn't matter. Obviously didn't score you on that, but that does change the way I'm perceiving what's happening. And same thing with stuff that's in backgrounds and you know, the tie that you choose, or, you know, the jacket you're wearing or not wearing, or whatever, like all of that little kind of stuff, even though I know I'm not judging on it, it is part of the advocacy. So all of y'all did fine with that today. So I'm not necessarily harping on anybody doing a bad job of it. I'm just making sure you're thinking about it so that when you're doing the next rounds or whatever else you're doing next, that you're adding to your advocacy at every step of the way.
I think my one thing is like, how many of y'all want to go to law school? Yay. I was like, because I know some people that just do it just for fun, and then like some people actually like want to go to law school. That's awesome. Y'all come to Baylor. Just be prepared to die in the third year, but like come to Baylor.
Right. Well, especially if this is what you want to do. If you want to write contracts, you know, you don't have to.
You can still come to Baylor.
You still should, but you don't have to.
All right, we'll let y'all go
Adam,
so that
it's
way
your courtroom.
Yeah.
y'all can eat.
Yeah, go. Good luck next round. Go take a break.
Thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to judge. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
You guys.
If y'all ever need anything, just let us know. You guys can email me or whatever. Just let me know.
All right.
Bye, y'all.
Do I end it? Do I just end it?
I think so.
Yeah, or that or we're all gonna leave and you're gonna be here by yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
On YouTube by yourself.
Good luck with DC.
Oh, thanks. It's a